afternoon. Welcome to This Is Now. Former President Trump can remain on primary election ballots.
In a unanimous decision, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed the Colorado Supreme Court decision that Mr. Trump was ineligible because of his role in the U.S. Capitol attack. Alice Barr has the latest developments.
Hi there. The Supreme Court ruled quickly today in a case that has huge implications for the upcoming election. The judges deciding unanimously that states cannot kick former President Trump off of their ballots. This reverses a Colorado Supreme Court decision where those state Supreme Court justices had said the former president should be off the ballot on grounds that he engaged in insurrection for his actions leading up to January 6th. And this all stemmed from the Constitution's 14th Amendment, a provision there. But essentially, the U.S. Supreme Court has now ruled the lower court had wrongly assumed states can determine if a presidential candidate is ineligible. That makes it clear the high court believes that Congress, not states, have authority over how to use that 14th Amendment provision. There were a number of other similar challenges out there, but this ruling applies to all states, and it comes a day before Super Tuesday when voters in Colorado will head to the polls along with more than a dozen other states. Former President Trump celebrated the ruling on social media, calling it a big win for America. In Washington, I'm Alice Barr. Back to you.
Thank you so much. And as Alice mentioned, Super Tuesday is coming up. It is a crucial day for the candidates, the single largest day of voting in the primary calendar when voters in 15 states go to the polls. Here's Danya Backus with more.
Hello, Texas!
Nikki Haley urged voters in Texas to go to the polls on Super Tuesday.
We don't anoint kings in America. We have elections. And Texans deserve the right to be able to vote.
Haley made history Sunday, becoming the first woman to win any Republican primary when she bested former President Trump in Washington, D.C.'s contest.
The choice comes down to this. We can either have more of the same, or we can go in a new direction.
Still, the former UN ambassador is far behind the former president and delegates needed to secure the GOP nomination.
We've been launching like a rocket to the Republican nomination.
California is one of 15 states voting on Super Tuesday. Tomorrow's contest will award more than a third of delegates in the race, meaning Trump can all but lock up the nomination with a big night. He is already looking ahead to a rematch with President Biden in November.
The poll numbers are very good. We're beating President Biden in almost every poll.
The former president says Biden is trying to use the courts to beat him, but says that's backfired.
The polls show that I'm much more popular than I was before weaponization.
On the eve of Tuesday's contests, the Supreme Court ruled states must keep Trump's name on the ballot. Danya Backus, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Honolulu police are trying to track down two men wanted for a robbery in West Oahu. Police say the suspects walked up to a man in the area of Eva Mahiko District Park at around 3 a.m. yesterday and asked him for a cigarette. The men then started arguing, and one of the suspects allegedly shot the 55-year-old victim in the face with a BB gun. The victim's belongings were then taken. No descriptions of the suspects have been made available.
Congress is in a race against the clock to pass a long-term funding bill before the government's shutdown deadline at the end of the week. Mike Valerio joins us to run through what's included in the landmark deal and what it's going to take to get it across the finish line. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Absolutely. Aloha, Emily. Well, it's actually refreshing to start this week off on an optimistic note with news of a deal on this round of spending bills. Both Republicans and Democrats can point to wins within this agreement, and they have until midnight on Friday, Emily, to make it happen.
On the heels of yet another short-term funding deal to keep the government open.
A shutdown is a loser for the American people.
Finally, a breakthrough on Capitol Hill. Top lawmakers unveiling a slate of 6 bipartisan appropriations bills Sunday evening that will avert another looming shutdown while delivering necessary funds to government agencies and departments, including military and veterans affairs, agriculture, commerce, transportation, energy, and housing, among others. Both sides touting big wins. Democratic Senator Patty Murray says the package fully funds the WIC program, which provides nutrition assistance to women and children, while Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson celebrated some conservative victories, including cuts to agencies like the FBI and EPA. The package also includes important investments in hiring new air traffic controllers and rail safety inspectors, and funds veteran health benefits. But even as the two parties come together to keep the government operational, the funding feud isn't over. Lawmakers still need to address their impasse over border security and critical aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza after bipartisan legislation failed to pass last month.
We're getting the government funding done, and then we're going to turn to these other priorities. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Lawmakers have until March 22nd to pass the deal and keep the government funded for the rest of the fiscal year.
Okay, so Emily, tracking the movements of this thing, members of the House and Senate come back to D.C. tomorrow, and the House is going to go first. They will begin to take this up on Wednesday. Then we have, of course, the State of the Union on Thursday. It's going to be a busy week over in D.C., but they seem to be on it, at least for these 6 initial spending bills, Emily.
Yeah, that's definitely good to hear. But, Mike, what happens to the next 6 bills? Those are seen as the spending bills that are harder to pass?
Right. I think that's a good way of putting it. So within the next round, the second act that we still have to worry about, it's funding for the Department of Homeland Security, for the Department of Labor, for Health and Human Services. Those historically, Emily, are areas and departments that are a little harder to come to an agreement on. And we don't have a glimmer of optimism about both sides coming to an agreement on funding just those 3 areas, for example, like we do with this first act, with that midnight on Friday deadline. So that's why even after this week, you could still hear the storylines of a potential shutdown continuing. They got 18 days to work that part of the equation out. March 22nd, again, is their deadline.
Got it. And, when we're talking about government funding, there's also the question of whether Ukraine will see any help from Congress anytime soon. Where do we stand on that?
We've talked to our team that's on Capitol Hill, and it's all up to Speaker Mike Johnson. So it's unclear what is going to happen to funding with Ukraine. It is his call. It's up to him to move that ball further down the field. But, Emily, there are members of Congress on the far right of the spectrum, like Congresswoman Marjorie Greene, for example, who have told our colleagues later in the previous week that they are not for this, that they are going to revolt. And Speaker Johnson cannot afford to have members of the far right of his party revolt and potentially kick him out of his speakership. So it's going to be interesting to see what President Biden does on Thursday when he delivers the State of the Union in terms of stagecraft, seeing who he invites to the address and what kind of pressure he puts on members of Congress and the nation to get that done.
Got it. Well, definitely something that we'll be looking for. Thank you so much for your reporting, Mike.
We are approaching an important deadline at the Hawaii State Capitol. For more on this, we're joined by our very own Daryl Huff. Daryl, what can you tell us?
Well, what we're heading up to is first crossover, which means a lot of stuff that's just rubbish gets dissipated because they have to have a committee vote, final committee vote, get it to the House or Senate floor, pass it to the other side, first crossover. As you know, all legislation has to pass both houses in the same form. So bills that don't get out of the first house are generally dead unless they come over from the second house, blah, blah, blah. So things don't really die at this stage, but you really get a sense of what's going on.
And what are some of the top issues under the microscope at this point?
The 3 issues are Maui, Maui, and Maui. It's causing a real freak out in the state Senate because you've got asks coming from the governor's office that are way, way higher than was ever expected. $600 million now. They already were spending $200 million, another $400 million coming in requests that just stunned lawmakers just in the last couple of weeks. And they're basically saying 52 pickup with the whole state budget, all of the big plans. The governor was very optimistic before the session in saying, we should not be knocked off of our regular agenda by Maui. But the fact is, they're knocked off the regular agenda by Maui, and they're coming to grips with it right now.
And one of those specific issues you mentioned was the One Ohana Fund. Tell us what's the issue there.
Sure. The One Ohana Fund is an effort to give people an option of early settlement of their lawsuits against HECO, the state, the county, the landowners, and so on. So all these folks have pitched money into a $175 million fund that's offering $1.5 million to families of people who were actually killed in the fire and smaller amounts to people who had serious injuries. It's going to be run by a guy named Ronald Ibarra, former judge, who is going to be having to figure all this out. What is confusing about it to some people is, wait a minute, I have to sign away my right to sue. But they're only signing away their right to sue over wrongful death. So they could also still sue for property damage, which a lot of them I expect will, because they didn't just lose lives, they lost houses. Also emotional distress, those sorts of things will still be lawsuits. So it won't end the lawsuits, but for some people it might be an option that they want to take.
And according to some of our previous reports, we know that some lawmakers haven't been on the same page with this, from the early stages of it as well. But turning now to other issues aside from Maui, what else is facing the key cutoff point here?
Well, what they're doing now, for the most part, is they're just keeping stuff alive. They're passing things along. For example, they passed a GET tax break for medical professionals, for doctors, which has been in the works for a while. The governor talked about it. They passed what's called the GAP plan, which is a tax relief plan for ALICE families and for some middle-class families who would have their tax deductions indexed. But for the most part, it still is all about Maui, trying to figure out what's going on there. FEMA was a lot less generous than was expected. The cost of housing the folks in hotels is a lot more than expected. And they're just scrambling to come up with money. So all of the tax breaks, things like the prison, the stadium, it's all been put back on the table because they're not sure whether they're going to be able to afford everything that they want.
Well, a lot to keep an eye on at the state capitol. And thank you so much, Daryl Huff, for your insight on all of these issues.
My pleasure, Dylan.
Little Plumeria Farms in Haleiwa has been operating for more than 5 decades, and the family says Saturday's theft is the biggest to hit their farm since it opened. They say 2 containers on the property were emptied that were once full of small equipment worth an estimated $100,000.
So many tools, drones. It's very important. It's like we can't really work at the farm without these tools. So it's a setback.
Law enforcement sources say the tools were hauled away by thieves early Saturday morning using one of the farm's own trailers. The Littles say an additional $10,000 worth of heavy equipment was also taken, but recovered by HPD.
The first over-the-counter birth control pill approved in the U.S., Opill, is available in stores and online this month. It can be bought directly from its own website, opill.com, in the coming days, but it could take a few weeks for the medication to reach pharmacy shelves. Manufacturer Perrigo has suggested a retail price of $20 for a 1-month supply and $50 for a 3-month supply. The company says when taken as directed, Opill is 98% effective at preventing pregnancy. That's in line with the effectiveness of most birth control pills. There was a major political move in France today as the country enshrined the right to abortion in its constitution. In an exceptional joint session of Parliament convened at the Palace of Versailles, the bill was approved in a 780 to 72 vote. There is wide support for abortion in France across most of the political spectrum, and it has been legal since 1975. France is the first country to make such a move since Yugoslavia inscribed it in its 1974 constitution. Serbia's 2006 constitution added that everyone has the right to decide on childbirth. There were jubilant scenes of celebrations all over France as women's rights advocates hailed the measure promised by President Emmanuel Macron immediately following the Dobbs ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2022. Both houses of Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate, had already adopted a bill to amend Article 34 of the French Constitution to specify that, quote, the law determines the conditions by which is exercised the freedom of women to have recourse to an abortion which is guaranteed, end quote. A 3/5 majority in the joint session was required for the measure to be approved.
Now to a consumer alert. Trader Joe's has recalled more than 61,000 pounds of its chicken soup dumplings because of possible plastic contamination. The manufacturer says it received complaints that people found hard plastic from a permanent marker inside the food. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is urging people to throw away or return the item. The agency hasn't received any reports of illness or injuries.
Turning now to Hawaii Island, where some boaters are sharing their concerns over the Wailoa Small Boat Harbor. Casey Lund has the story.
It wasn't long ago I wouldn't be able to stand where I'm standing now at Wailoa Boat Harbor. But bad weather, surf, it's brought so much sand in over the years that the channel here has become almost impassable for larger vessels. They get stuck occasionally, and very often they at least hit bottom. As a matter of fact, we caught it on camera.
Wing, something.
Did he just kind of hit?
Yeah, he just hit. Yeah, he's stuck.
This boat eventually navigated the channel and made it into the harbor, but some vessels aren't always that lucky. Kainoa Hauanio is boating program coordinator for UH Hilo. The boat behind him has been moored at Wailoa Harbor and someone else has slipped for weeks. Like many others here, the risk of running aground getting out just isn't worth it.
That's why we can't take students out of here, because it's a safety issue. If anybody gets hurt, it's going to come back to us, because we know that the channel is shallow and it's a liability. If it's on a fisherman, you know, they have to deal with this. They're not even guaranteed on making any money yet, you know. So if they hit on the way out, they're already out $500, say, and then they're spending fuel, their gear and everything to go back out. So I feel for them.
He and other boaters are pleading with the DLNR Division of Boating and Ocean Resources to dredge the channel. Things got really bad just a couple of weeks back in early February during storms.
You know, it looks bad for everybody, not just, you know, the DLNR and the DOBAR who have to take care of this, but even us as well, because as an entity, we're all kind of like out of the same pot, you know. So I don't know, I just try to make the best out of it.
This is the channel that we have to work with now. You see, all of this sand that's been brought in is just really impeded our passage. Very dangerous rock wall on that side. As you can see, the shoaling right between the two channel markers, that water that's, you know, disturbed, that's where it's very, very shallow.
Captain Jerry Gilgren owns Malama Charters in Hilo Bay. He says this is impacting his bottom line and guest safety.
We actually have to check the tides in order to get any type of water depth so that we can gauge whether we can go in or out. And as a result of that, we've had to cancel tours. We have actually dragged bottom with clients on board, and they're like, whoa, what is that? And we've had to shift them forward so that we can get a little bit more depth to get our propeller and our rudder through.
This is on top of the frustration many boaters are already feeling on Hawaii Island that 6 years after Kilauea's 2018 eruption, DLNR still hasn't dredged a new viable boat ramp at Po'oiki. For commercial fishermen, that leaves them only one option on the east side of Hawaii Island, and this is it, Wailoa Small Boat Harbor. In a statement, the DLNR says they're aware of the problem and have been asking the legislature for funding to dredge the harbor for years. That funding finally came through, but now they have to put in bids and get a contractor to do the work and permits from the county and the Army Corps of Engineers. That could take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. The earliest work might begin is sometime this summer. We'll keep this story updated. Reporting in Hilo, I'm Casey Lund, Hawaii News Now.
Thank you, Case. Let's take a live look outside. This is Philly in Pennsylvania. The temperature there, 59 degrees on this Aloha Monday. We're going to have a check on what you can expect this work week with Guy Hoggy after this quick break.
How's it on this Monday? As you can see, a very juicy disturbance is moving up and over the state. The Big Island has got some heavy rainfall, and some of that heavy rainfall will likely drift over to Maui. And then Oahu and Kauai, fairly dry for now, but we're likely to see those scattered showers with increasing rainfall starting tonight through tomorrow. Again, that's for Kauai and Oahu. Statewide, we'll have some pretty gusty winds through the next several days. In fact, the wind's going to get even stronger starting on Wednesday. So Monday's going to look like this. Cloudy skies, scattered showers. Some areas of the state, especially the east end, could get some heavy rainfall today, and that could lead to flooding. Now, later tonight through tomorrow, Kauai and Oahu expected to see more showers and possibly some thunderstorms as well. Surf's on the way down, but still big in the country and on the west side, and box jellyfish continue to swim into the south shore. So again, we're highlighting today and tomorrow for the heaviest rainfall. First for the east end of the state today, then for the west end of the state tomorrow. Now, scattered showers will likely linger for the rest of the week, and those gusty trade winds will pick up Wednesday, holding firm into next week.
Residents in South Jordan, Utah woke up to a bizarre sight over the weekend, an invasion of thousands of tumbleweeds taking over the lawns and the yards in front of their home. Alex Cabrero has more.
Of all the things to see in South Jordan, John Young,
I don't know,
never thought his home would become the latest attraction.
You take pictures, you take videos, and you hope the wind changes.
It's not every day you see thousands of tumbleweeds roll in for a visit.
I opened up the blinds, and this was on my front porch.
There's even a cairn there somewhere.
What do? You just laugh. There's nothing to do but laugh.
As heavy winds blew through this daybreak neighborhood in South Jordan, avoiding tumbleweeds kind of became a sport. And the more you tried to get rid of them, the more that seemed to just come right back.
Yeah, it twirls.
Stan Romero had quite the surprise when he opened his garage door this morning.
And boom, it was 10 foot high, coming in the garage. Oh, close that door.
South Jordan street workers showed up with a dumpster and backhoe to clear roads and pathways.
Luckily, it's something we can handle. This is not our first Tumbleweed.
It's true. Daybreak has been through a tumbleweed invasion before. You tend to get that as you develop into open land, but this is about as western as it gets.
We've had a few tumbleweeds, but nothing like this. It's absolutely crazy.
In Minnesota, fans of women's sports are celebrating after the opening of a bar that showcases only sports played by female athletes. Now, the bar's owner says it's time for them to have a place to call their own. Jason Rantala takes us there.
With a line along the building.
It's a happy day. It's a real happy day.
And people waiting more than an hour to get inside, this level of pageantry may be fitting. A first pitch for the first Minnesota bar showcasing all women's sports all the time.
I played hockey for about 12 years, and we had to beg to get ice time.
People of all ages.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Packing the inside of the bar before lunchtime.
For a place for all women's sports to be able to watch. And there's TVs everywhere, wall to wall.
The Seward Neighborhood Watering Hole is taking the space of the former Tracy Saloon and Eatery.
Absolute madness, but in the best way possible.
Owner Jillian Hiscock says the goal was to create a space dedicated to women's sports and fans after visiting a sports bar last year that did anything but.
I think people have been ready for this and waiting for this for a really long time, and so to have it here and to have folks inside means so much.
This is incredible. I love the atmosphere. I love the fact that we finally have a place like this here in Minnesota.
A place so popular Friday, Jillian and her staff really have to work to keep up.
Our team has been really busy getting ready for it. We're doing our best to get everything out as quickly as we can, but it's just really fun to have folks here.
Fans say they hope it's just the start of establishments embracing women's athletics.
Bar their own! Cheers!
Cheers to them indeed. Hey, before we go, I want to give a shout out to Anne from Honolulu. She called the newsroom to ask what type of lei this is. It's actually an akulikuli lei, which is famous from Waimea. It is a vibrant orange. There are many different colors to it. I got it at a gig in Kona over the weekend at the Donkey Mill Art Center. So much fun over there.
It's
so
beautiful.
Mahalo nui. Thank you all so much for tuning in to This Is Now. Have a great rest of your day.